The government could get a majority in the Senate with a stroke of a pen. There's absolutely no excuse for having their legislation gutted, and they should be loudly called out for incompetence, should that be something that actually happens. There's an easy answer to avoid this. Fill the Senate with liberal senators immediately. It's just incompetence to leave the Senate open, and they complain that they can't pass legislation. If it's by design, then that's contempt of Parliament. And if it's through blowback, then it's incompetence. So he's incompetent or he's corrupt. Pick your choice. It's the same outcome either way. When I voted for the Liberals, it was because I wanted them to pass legislation, not because I wanted them to create a mess in the Senate that would prevent them from passing legislation. It's a comically absurd situation. He's obstructing his own agenda. The media should really be taking him to task for it. It doesn't matter what you think of the Senate. This is the worst possible outcome from any perspective. When our framers, who were not Americans, designed our system of government, it was very consciously done to prevent the errors that the people in the United States made when they constructed their system of government. That's why our country has avoided the kinds of problems that exist in the American system of government. And nowhere at any point have we ever made a choice that we want to be that we want to emulate or mimic the American system. Everywhere we have always made the choice that we want to avoid the problems that exist in the United States. So I don't want a system of checks and balances. I don't want an independent Senate. And that really wasn't what was in the platform, nor what anybody voted for. What was in the platform was some empty language about appointing people based on merit that nobody took seriously. This is corruption, and it's the way that it should be viewed. Okay, this is an attempt to sabotage the way the state functions, and it should not be tolerated. Again, I voted for the Liberals. I broadly support the guy's platform. I don't think he's the person that should be running the country. In a sense, the Prime Minister is not like the President. He's the titular head of state. Not even technically the titular head of government, but it's just beyond the pale. And this should not be viewed as an opportunity for the Senate to prove itself. It should be viewed in terms of being a corruption scandal, because he's sabotaging the business of the House, and it should not be tolerated by the opposition. It should not be tolerated by the people in his own party. To organize a state that cannot function is even bordering on a line of treason, and it just should not. His own party needs to react, because if they can't pass their own legislation, then it's it reduces the whole process to a cynical joke, right? And it's unfortunately he seems to have the media on his side on this, because the media in the country is very anti-populist. It's the media. I've been over this before. The media in the country is old Tory. Okay, what that means is it's deeply aristocratic, very skeptical of people, and this kind of is going to tickle them the right way, sort of thing, and that's dangerous, right? It should not be. The media should. I've seen a few articles, but the media should really be just railing on this and doing everything it can to force the government to reverse its Senate reform policies, to appoint a functioning Senate, to prevent an elected body from interfering with the business of democracy in the country, and to get things moving back the way that they should be. If this happens again, I'm gonna get people out marching. This is enough for me to create a revolt type situation, because it's the abolition of democracy, not the strengthening of it. And people need to stand up and indicate that they won't tolerate this. So, as it stands right now, we've got a bill that was passed, that was created by Democratic representatives, and we have an unelected body that thinks it has the mandate to stop it. And the issue, the bill doesn't even matter. The real issue is that people need to ensure that the Senate does not think it has the right to modify legislation that's put forward by elected representatives, because it doesn't. The harder it wants to push, the harder people need to push back. And we need to be talking about getting rid of it. If it insists on interfering with the process of democracy in the country, then the Senate needs to be abolished, and that's all there is to it. Again, I got to point out that I don't know how much Steve Paikin I can take. There's quite a bit of it in this list here. The whole second half of 2014. But if you're not really familiar with Canadian conservatism, maybe that's kind of one of my sub themes here, is how Canadian conservatives aren't so bad. I mean, relatively speaking, if you live in Canada, they might seem pretty bad, but it's a relativistic thing, right? I've said this many times. Most people would argue that the Canadian Conservative Party is well to the left of the Democrats in the United States. But this is, if you want to see what he's what you might call an Eastern Tory, right? That's right, an Eastern Conservative, and the Eastern Conservatives are, it's the same thing in the United States, right? You have terms like New York Republican, right? But the Ontario Tories are like, if you're conservative in Ontario, chances are you'd be considered a borderline communist in the United States. It's the truth of it. But if you're curious as to what that means, watch this guy, because he's actually kind of a good example of the Ontario Conservative, in the sense that he'll start off like if you the first line of questioning, he'll sound like Bill O'Reilly, right? And this is public television, right? This is TVO. He'll start off and like any other conservative douchebag, right? But he doesn't push the points, and you can tell that he doesn't. It doesn't take a lot of convincing, right? Before he sees before he realizes he's being unreasonable, and you almost have to think that his O'Reilly shtick is kind of more of a facade. It's an act, right? But that might be the case with a lot of public conservatives in Ontario. So, for example, this is about payday loans, and we have payday loan companies here too, unfortunately. And he just starts off. He's like, "Well, you have a service, you have a product, you have a market. This is capitalism. You got a product, you got a market. What's the problem?" Right? Sounding very much like a Bill O'Reilly, right? And his guest explains well, a lot of people don't like the idea of usury. They think that this whole idea of a rentier class is she tied it back to Aristotle. I think few people would do that, but anyways, just this idea of not liking, the idea of making money on top of money, um, and that was enough, right? You didn't need to, if it was Bill O'Reilly, we would have got some stupid comeback, right? But that was enough to convince him. It's like, yeah, I guess 650% is maybe a little extreme. Maybe a few regulations, so that wouldn't be so crazy. Even though you have you do have a product and you have a market, and maybe a little bit of regulation there's not so crazy, right? What do I think the solution is? Well, I mean, the payday low thing is a big thing, right? A lot of people, it does make people angry, right? And it is because it's so much, right? It's one thing to say, we'll let it to you at 110% or 150%, right? It's just the ridiculous levels of interest. It pushes people's buttons wrong, a lot of them, especially considering that most of the time. I mean, you'll get the arguments. It's people need to sell their shit to buy cocaine or something, right? But and I'm sure that happens, right? But I mean, most of the time, what you're dealing with is more along the lines of just wages that are too low to live on, right? Ontario is actually not so bad with the minimum wage thing. We have our minimum wage indexed to inflation. It's a little lower than what people would call the living wage in some regions, whereas in other regions it's about right. I think that as far as the minimum wage thing is, I actually think that from a provincial level, it's probably roughly right. If you live in Sudbury or Thunder Bay, or even in Windsor, the minimum wage is not low relative to the cost of living. If you live in Toronto, it's very high. If you live in Toronto, it's very low. If you live in Ottawa, it's very low. So I would argue that the better approach is for those municipalities to put regulations in place. But there's constitutional issues with that. And that's certainly part of it, right? I think ultimately at the end of the day, what Steve here is saying is unassailable from a logical point of view. He's right. You have a product, you have a market. So long as there's a market, so how do you deal with that is, sure, you try to deal a little bit with the wage issues, you try to eliminate the market. But I think another thing that you do is you try to control the product. And the nature of these businesses is such that I would actually argue in favor of governments entering the market and setting their own regulations for them to do so. I actually think that it would be a good source of revenue. And then that money could be used to fund various social initiatives, right? Now, if a government were to do this, it would be very heavily regulated, of course, and the interest rates would be a lot lower, right? So if they were to regulate the interest rates around 150% or something like that, then they would be able to provide the service um, in a way that most people would find less egregious. In fact, what they could even do is they could take that money that they got and funnel it into resources that would benefit the people that are taking the loans. You'll no doubt run into opposition with that, and a lot of the people you'd run into opposition with are going to have good arguments. But with something that like this specifically, like if you put down a whole bunch of regulations, all you're doing is you're pushing it out into the black market, right? And that's exactly, I mean, that's what payday loans that used to be called loan sharking, and it ended up, people would end up with broken legs as a consequence of it. It's a very old thing, right? So long as people need the money, there's going to be, this shit's going to happen. So what you do is something along the lines of harm reduction, right? You get the state to do it. So I may not, I might not agree that the solution is a market. I often find that's the issue with classical liberals, and that's probably the better way to describe this guy. Old-timey liberals that believe in markets and low government interference. I often agree with their logic. It's just, therefore, Hayek, that's what I can't get my head around. Therefore, capitalism, I don't, Sure. The start of his argument was great. It's the conclusion that's the problem. Rather than saying, okay, that means we should have a business model here, I would say, no, that means the state needs to step in and take control of it directly to prevent the abuses in the market. Because this isn't the kind of thing that you can regulate. You've got to control it directly. Unfortunately, I realize that the intellectual climate is very hostile to that at the moment. But it may be less so here than it is down there. Something to think about. Anyways. So there's this guy here at the Huffington Post. His name is H.A. Goodman. I think, if I understand correctly, he made a prediction about Sanders winning around the new year, and he just can't let go of it, right? So he's grasping at everything that he possibly can. This argument is about the indictment with the emails, right? Anything that Hillary's going to get indicted and Bernie's going to come to save the day, which nobody actually thinks on the inside. I mean, even if Hillary does get indicted, a lot of people think she'll just keep running anyways, which is just, I mean, it really says a lot about her character, right? She's being under suspicion for a crime, and she thinks she can still be, it's like, again, I've been over this before. I really think that Hillary's biggest problem is that she doesn't have advisors. She needs to get people around her rather than, this kind of like echo chamber, right? Like somebody has to be able to tell her these things, right? But nobody does, right? To fear her or whatever, right? And I mean, that's the, it's the nature of a dictator, right? Dictators don't get criticism because everybody's afraid to criticize them. But this is his argument here anyways, right? I mean, even if she does get indicted, she probably will keep running, but everybody knows that if she does step down, it's not going to be Sanders that steps in, right? It's going to be somebody on the inside. The guy thrown around usually is Biden, but I'm not sure that's even the most obvious out of all of them, right? You can see somebody like Nancy Pelosi thrown in instead, right? Who knows? Anyways, the Pelosi continues to actually look fairly good for her age, and I mean just that's a take that comment for what it is. It always surprises me when I find out how old Nancy Pelosi is. And I've said more than once, obviously, but it always surprises me. How old is Nancy Pelosi? She's like 78 or something. She's in her mid to late 70s, anyways. Let's see her. Come on. Come on, Wiki. What the hell? Okay. Yeah, she's 76. She's older than Bernie Sanders. It's she doesn't look 76. That's the thing, right? Looks more like 56. Anyways, where's I going in with that? Yeah, so maybe Nancy Pelosi isn't the most likely, but you get the point, right? So somebody other than Sanders is gonna get parachuted in, right? What I'm saying is, like, dude, listen, you're half right, but you're grasping at straws. What you're suggesting is that Hillary will be indicted before the convention, and Bernie will therefore be the nominee. But this is some kind of projective fantasy thinking, right? In fact, the reason that Hillary has not been indicted yet, and everybody agrees that the investigation is dragging its feet, that it should be moving along quicker. Why is it moving so slowly? It's that Bernie refuses to concede. I mean, if it were the case that Clinton were to be indicted tomorrow and dropped out the next day, then that would mean that Bernie would likely be the nominee and he would probably win. So, I mean, do you think these people really want that? It's like, get real, right? I mean, if they're going to take Clinton down, it's not because they think she's too conservative and they want somebody more liberal. It's the great lie, right? This thing that lets the system function. I'm stumbling here. The system needs this lie to work, and that lie is that the perception that the United States is a democracy. We all know it really isn't. The whole thing is political theater, every cycle, every time. But we fall for it because we want to believe the lie. We want to believe. They've got great screenwriters, though. They do, really. Here's the plot, man. Okay. First, they've got to get rid of Bernie. It's the first thing they have to do. Okay. Everything else is on hold until Bernie is gone. Okay. Nothing else happens. And then once Bernie's gone, then they can think about indicting Hillary. Although Trump is not making himself particularly appealing. He may have signaled that he wants to participate and play along, but he just can't keep his foot out of his mouth, right? So, but as long as Bernie is running, she'll prolong the charges. Okay? They will not charge her so long as Bernie is running. Okay, it's impossible. But don't be surprised if the indictment comes within hours of Bernie conceding. In fact, they may have charged her weeks ago if Bernie had, conceded like he was supposed to. So why won't Bernie concede? But then once Bernie's gone, they can use the email scandal to take her down, which I believe is what it was created for. If you look at it, it's I went over this once before. It's like they're charging her with sending information that was classified after she resigned. It's like really hard to get your head around. and then apparently, they're suggesting that Colin Powell also sent out information that was not classified, but then later classified, so he should be responsible for sending it out when it wasn't classified. It's the kind of thing that is confusing enough that most people will not bother trying to understand, and the media doesn't care. The media doesn't want you to understand things; they just want to work you up, right? So, as long as they get the headline out of it, and Hillary Clinton indicted, that's what they want, right? With the newspaper flying around, they sell things. They're not, they're not in the knowledge industry. They're in the business of selling you trash, just like everything else, right? And a lot of it is they sell advertising, right? And you could even make the argument that they put all the money into her campaign to ensure they could get the good scandal out of her, right? That's it's how these people operate, right? Like they don't care about policy. They care about selling things, right? So, I do believe that that's why the scandal exists, is to take her down. She just happened to run into a situation where both of her opponents are making themselves appear unelectable to the elites. So once Bernie is gone, then they can use the email scandal to take her down. So long as Trump lines up. Don't be surprised if that happens, although it's not. It's becoming less and less clear that Trump is going to line up, even though I do think that was the intention, right? And if that does work itself out, if they decide that they can stay with Trump, then expect a complete media takedown. Expect it to be brutal, and expect it to be final, right? Because, like I say, the people doing things in the background, they're the shady types, the shadow government. They hate her, and they don't hate her a little bit; they hate her a lot. She doesn't seem to care. I don't know. Anyways, so it's not going to be Bernie. But here's an interesting twist. The only way to stop the indictment is probably for Bernie to launch an independent run at the exact same time as he drops out of the Democratic primary. Because then Bernie's still a threat. And indicting her is no less risky. Otherwise, you're looking at the party bosses picking a candidate when the indictment does finally come. And Bernie's not on the list. But again, this all revolves around whether or not they can line up behind Trump. And they want to. They desperately want to. But he's doing just about everything he possibly can to make himself unelectable. And see, I wrote this back on the 6th. Even on the 6th, it seemed like, he was, he was being walked down the garden path. But it's now the 15th when I'm narrating this, and it's hard to see how it happens. Even if they're gonna give him some more time, and they might come around to him still. But it's just, it's hard to run a guy for president when you have to, put him on a leash and put a muzzle on him, and it's just, he's a bad dog, and that's all there is to it. So yeah, I think I expressed myself clearly enough there. So, to be a little provocative for a moment, I think the facts in the Trump University case are clear enough. It was a scam, and Trump is deflecting, right? So, would the ruling have been different if the judge had a different ethnicity. Well, I hope not. But it's a little curious to me that accusing an Hispanic judge of racial bias is a horrible injustice, whereas accusing a white judge of racial bias is the core of a theory taught in university courses all around the continent. Can we get some consistency here? Let's do a reality check. Okay? Trump has been railing against Hispanics for months. I really don't think it's so outlandish to suggest that this might affect the ruling. When you deny this, what you're really doing is pushing this thoroughly debunked justice is blind model of legal theory. It's just not right. Not as a way to describe how the legal system actually works in reality. Rather, we have something called critical legal theory that explains the decisions made in courtrooms in terms of things like racial and gender biases, class analysis, ideological positions. Judges don't exist in a vacuum. Their opinions come out in their rulings. So would that mean that the ruling is invalid? No. It would mean that there are consequences for running your mouth off. When a racist black judge, when a racist white judge makes a ruling against a black person, we have a legal theory that describes that, right? It's called critical legal theory. One of the okay, so what is critical legal theory? Well, critical legal theory is the idea that biases will affect a judge's ruling, more so than evidence will, right? So that may come out in terms of things like class, or race, or gender, right? So you may have, well, I mean, it surprises no one to suggest that the law comes down on the side of the wealthy more often than it does on the side of the poor, right? It comes down on the side of the powerful more often than the side of the less powerful. It comes down on insiders more often than outsiders, whites more often than blacks, etc., right? We all agree with that. But then somehow when you have an Hispanic judge and a white defendant, we expect justice to be blind. And there's a humongous furor over it, and everything else, right? If the situation was reversed, if the judge had been saying all kinds of racist things, everyone would take it for granted that his biases had something to do with the outcome. So, I think that the Republican response to this is as rooted in a rejection of critical legal theory, as it is in a rejection of racist statements. Because the truth is that what Trump has said about the case is something that you would expect a modern leftist to say. It's a very left-wing analysis of the legal system. So, it's more consistent to suggest that, it's just another example of the Republican power hierarchy, not being able to deal with this guy, and his positions just not aligning with the Republican Party, right? So that's what I have to say about that. It's again, it's not to suggest that the judge was wrong. I think anybody looking at the case can agree very quickly that the judge was, the judge did not err in his decision. But maybe we can look at it at a different way, right? If the judge was, rich white guy, one of Trump's golfing buddies or something, and that does happen, right? That's the whole critical legal theory analysis. Then he would have ruled on it in favor of Trump, right? And then we could have said, this ruling came down the way it did because Trump is a member of a certain class, and the old boys club looks out for itself, right? And his argument, while rather weak, just exposes that, right? So it's not it. The argument that Trump is presenting is wrong, but I don't think it's fundamentally outlandish. And I mean, it may not even be wrong in the sense that if it was a different judge, the judge might have ruled differently, right? It wouldn't mean the judge may have ruled incorrectly if it was a different judge. So justice is not blind. Judges don't. This whole idea that judges look at evidence and weigh it irrespective. That's not how the legal system works. And the only people that would argue, ironically, that is how the legal system works are, right-wing Republicans. Now, in 2016, those are the only people that would ever make that argument. Are the most ideologically entrenched right-wingers, which is what's happening, right? I haven't seen it yet, but I would love to see a critical legal theorist go after what Trump has said. While, I mean, the critical legal theory is as much about power hierarchy, right? And I know the obvious takedown is, Trump is a wealthy guy, a wealthy white male, this whole hierarchy thing. But I mean, let's look at it from a broader perspective here. Let's look at it from the perspective of biases, right? You can be outside of the, even the prime. I mean, like, have you seen a picture of the judge? The judge it's pasty white. He's a pasty white guy. Like, this isn't like some dark-skinned Mexican ruling. No, this is a pasty white guy. So, it's not quite the power imbalances aren't quite as clear as you might suggest, right? So I would like to see a critical legal theorist go after this and try to analyze it, even just as from a devil's advocate point of view, and see what kind of argument they can pull out of it, because that is essentially what he's presenting, right? It may be a little muddled. I'll grant you that. I'll grant you it's muddled, but it's essentially a critical legal theory argument, which is very much a left-wing position, right? Sorry, people that want to just say, he's a racist. That's it. That's not really what I got out of it, right? I mean, it's true, right? He is making a ridiculous argument, right? But it's more like I'm running for office. How do I get out of this mess, right? If the I don't watch the media, like I don't watch TV. I don't know what kind of media this is generated, but I mean the whole Trump University thing. If you really look into it, that's enough to disqualify him. Like if the United States was Iran, Trump would not be allowed to run, right? Not that that's an argument for the Iranian system or anything, but I'm just saying, like staunchly disqualifying, right? So I mean, it's more like how do I get out of this? And let's blame the Mexicans, right? Even though it's like he's pasty white, right? But I mean, it's more stupid than racist, right? It's just like a really bad argument, right? But I would still nonetheless like to hear a critical race theorist, or a critical legal theorist, not a CRT theorist, but a critical legal theorist, really flesh this out and explore it and explain why it is that the argument, while obviously disingenuous, is actually at the crux of contemporary legal theory on the left. Actually is, right? So yes, I do think Bernie should keep going, and I think he should run as an independent. But I know that he's not going to convince any superdelegates. See, I think he should push them to the absolute brink, make them show up and vote. But I don't think he has a real chance. It's just an act of protest. Um, it's being difficult for the sake of being difficult, which I do support. But I also know he's not going to run as an independent. So, what's next? I say that. I think everything he's done up to this point is to facilitate it, but it's a tactic, right? He has to make the threat believable. And if the DNC gets really hard-headed, but they'd have to. The DNC would have to really play this very poorly to get him to do that, right? He has broadcast that's unlikely, right? Even though, like I say, everything he's done up to this point is to facilitate it. I think the first thing that leftists and progressives, or whatever else you want to call us, need to do is start asking Hillary some questions. She says she wants to represent the left. She wants to represent Sanders voters. So she's going to have to start explaining how she reflects ideas that exist on the left. And this is the very soft left. These aren't crazy left-wing ideas. They're, the center of most political spectrums in most places in the world. So what we should do is we should ask Hillary questions every time we see her. Questions like this. Mrs. Clinton, or Secretary Clinton, when do you plan to table legislation for single-payer health care? And then watch her, buckle. But hey, she wants to represent, leftists. She wants Bernie supporters to vote for her. She wants unity, so obviously she must have plans to introduce a single-payer health care, right? Here's another question that she might have some difficulty with if you were to ask her. In public and at a press conference where lots of people are there to hear it. Given that you don't support taxes on Wall Street, Secretary, how do you expect to fund an opening of tuition at public universities and colleges? That's a really specific one, because that was her line of attack was that, well, how are you going to pay for this? Well, it's because his plan to pay for it is obviously, not acceptable, so therefore there isn't one. But again, she wants Bernie supporters to vote for her, so she must have thought through how she's going to pay for her opening of tuition at public universities and colleges. Here's another one that's key. Secretary Clinton, can you elaborate on your plans to withdraw American forces from the Middle East? That one would get a laugh, probably. But I think you get the point. There's two components to this. Okay, yes, there's a bit of sarcasm here. But the truth is that you're going to have to do this, something like this, okay? Even if you end up voting for Jill Stein in the end, you cannot give her a free pass. You cannot give up. You cannot drop the ideas, okay? But how do you find a non-confrontational way to demonstrate that there are differences that you can't gloss over? This is one way to do it, okay? If you just let her loose, she's going to immediately bolt back to the center right where she's most comfortable. So you have to keep constant pressure on her to hold to whatever concessions you can get out of her and constantly be pushing for more. The unity, tripe, and it is tripe, that the Democratic Party is going to want to push is going to get you nowhere besides, Obama Part 2, which is, more neocon, neoliberal trash, right? In the end, if she decides she wants to run on the right, you should force her to broadcast it. And you should force her to acknowledge the divisions that is going to cause. And you should force her to deal with the consequences of it. Okay? Don't just give up. Okay? Make her squirm. Make her sweat. Make her struggle. Make it hard on her. You're never going to get anything from her if you just line up behind her and you just follow her off the cliff, the figurative cliff. You got to push her, and I like this because, like I say, it's non-confrontational, but it draws attention to it. Yeah. So besides doing a lot of ranting, I've been pretty quiet this weekend. It's 11 o'clock on Monday night. And I think I finally got the vegging out of my system, and I'm ready to sit down and do some work. it's going to mean I've got a good week. Um, and I do think I can get quite a bit done over the next week. One of the things I've started off here is my Facebook page from 1996. And there's a shot of me that's actually from 1995. It's actually from, I went to a middle school that had grade 7 and 8. This was my grade 8 graduation from that school. Those are some shots of me. I was actually in elementary school at the time. Grade 5 or grade 6, I don't remember. But I was very young. That would make me 10, 11, or 12. Something like that. So, and I would be 14 there. I'm 15 in the alter reality. 1996. So that shot's about a year old, but I don't have anything newer than that. In fact, the next picture of me I have is not until 1997. At some point, undetermined, in 1997. I was actually very camera shy at that age period. I didn't want any pictures of me. If you go and look through my yearbook, you won't find pictures of me, or at least I tried to make it. It's kind of a funny story here. I can look back now and laugh. The girl that was in charge of the yearbook club was she was like the Lisa Simpson of the school, right? The super smart. Well, actually, maybe Lisa Simpson's a bad comparison because the Simpsons were fairly poor. Well, they were middle class, but I mean, half the storyline was about how they didn't have any money, right? They lived in a mansion, but they didn't have any money, right? So, the girl that was doing the yearbooks was from a wealthy family, but she got like 98 on everything, right? And that was her. So she ran the yearbook, right? It's kind of the stereotype, right? The kid on the yearbook club, right? For whatever reason, she seemed to have some kind of a crush on me, and she went out of her way to ensure that there were pictures of me in the yearbook. But I was fighting to get my picture out of the yearbook because I didn't want my picture in the yearbook, right? And she was trying to get it in there. So in the end, I don't know. I think she may have found some way to get me in a couple of the years. It was something that went on like through the whole way through, right? Because like she was actually in charge of the yearbook like in grade 10 or something, and it was like all the way through, right? So it was like it's actually one of the more memorable memories that I have of high school is fighting to get my picture out of the yearbook, and this meddlesome person trying to like force me in there. I don't know, like I say, like I think she had some kind of a crush on me, but I can't really figure out exactly why she was so insistent that I was in the yearbook, right? Besides that, like it's the only thing that made sense to me, right? So I'm aware of this. I'm trying to prevent it by every time I see a camera, and like she's like sneaking behind, trying to like take pictures of me. It was, like I say, in hindsight, it's funny, but at the time it was actually quite annoying. So there's, on top of that, like I didn't really let my parents take pictures of me either, right? And I mean, we can explain that through a little bit of discomfort with my gender, right? It's a consequence, right? I didn't really want pictures of me. I didn't want to be remembered. So, yeah, there's very few pictures of me during that period. I didn't let people take pictures of me very often. This is, like I say, this is a graduation picture. And between the point where I graduated grade 8, like I said, it was a middle school, it was 7, 8. like I have like 3 pictures of me throughout all of high school, right? And most of them are near the end, right? And then after that, there's like no pictures of me for like, well, there's some pictures of me with Sarah, but that's really just about it, right? Like it's very hard to find pictures of me. So there won't be a lot of updates. That's gonna be there. Like I say, it's a picture from 1995. It'll be there until the Ultra Reality gets through, but about midway through 1997. I guess we could say that that's my 1.1 period, and it'll switch over at 1.2, which is when I start integrating keyboard parts and stuff. So this is my, and I think it's fairly accurate actually. It's about what I looked like when I was just pumping out punk guitar parts in my basement studio. And I think maybe the picture might, listening to the music and looking at the picture, you might be able to connect it a little bit better, right? I wasn't a bad-looking kid either, was I? I really wasn't. I guess I can see the Eastern European in me. It's Northeastern European, right? I guess I kind of look a little Ukrainian, don't I? That's not that's something I've noticed over many years, is that I do kind of look a little Ukrainian. I'm not. I'm Finnish, and I'm a mix of Finnish and like Italian and Jewish and stuff. So it's kind of an approximation, right? But yeah, I have at times tried to call myself a derived Russian by pointing out that I'm Finnish and Jewish, which is kind of kind of Ashkenazi or something. Anyways, I do look like a little Russian kid. It's true, but I'm not just Finnish. I'm merely Finnish. Anyways, like I say, it's time to get this sorted out. I think I'm just about done on this machine here, which will let me turn that one back on. The temperatures come down in here a little. I had it just cranked for the day. We got an unexpected hot day today. It's supposed to cool down overnight. We'll see if that holds or not. It looks like it already has. So hopefully the air comes off, and if the air comes off, then I can turn the heat down, and it'll be good for the machine. So and it'll let the machine warm the room up a little, which is better than letting the heater do it. So like I say, I think I needed the time, needed the space to kind of veg a little. I did a lot of ranting, but it's time to get to work, and this is what the vlogs are going to be like for the next week. It's going to be all about this kind of thing. Talking about the ultra reality, different pieces, bits and pieces of it. It's also Monday. Well, I'll wait till tomorrow to do it. I keep saying I'm going to put the gear part in, and I keep not doing it because I keep not, actually getting back to work. I don't think I'm going to do much listening tonight. So we'll put the gear in tomorrow's vlog, and that's when we'll start that. Starting the 7th, it'll be on a weekly basis. It'll be Tuesdays, and that's how that'll work. So yeah, like I say, I'm pretty much done what I need to do here. Next step is to actually start building the Aleph sections, which will be on the other machine. So, it seems to be like everything is taking longer than I wanted to, again. They just removed the timeline from Facebook, which may seem, most people won't even notice it, but for me that's the entire point. And on top of that, they removed the timeline from Facebook pages, right? It's still there for the main page for who knows how long. If they remove it from the main page, I'm going to shut my site down altogether, right? Because there's no point. But removing it from pages means that, like, what I wanted to do is I wanted to ensure that all of the different things were the same, right? So that my Aleph disk and my two Facebook pages were aligned with each other. But I can't do that now because I can't scroll back to, in order for me to get back to 1995, or I'm in 1996, in order for me to get back to 1996 on my Facebook page for my Facebook artist page, I would have to scroll through all the way from 2016, 15, 14, all the way through thousands of posts, literally, to get down there. I can't jump there anymore. Which defeats the entire point, right? Like I say, number one, it means I can't do what I was planning on doing, and number two, it means there's not really any function for it at all. So instead of aligning all of these things together, what I'm going to have to do instead is rip everything out of the Facebook page. So that means I'm actually... See, this was a part of archiving that I wanted to put aside and do last because it didn't... Like, I would have had to redo it anyways, so why not just do it all at the same time? And then when I sat down to finally do it all at the same time, I can't do it. So instead I have to archive it. But I have to archive it from the top down, right? So this will probably take me a day or two. That's the reality of it. I don't think it's going to really put me off too much, but it means that I'm going to have to rethink how I'm doing this as well. I'm shutting down... I'm going to leave the Facebook page open for the Ultra Reality because it makes sense. But it doesn't make sense for me to use Facebook for current music. All I'm doing is creating a black hole of information that I can't access. I can't get it. It's just a really bad... I've been saying for a long time that Facebook is just really badly designed. But the one thing that saved it was the timeline format, right? Because it's really useful to be able to, analyze organize your information this way, be able to jump from back and forth. They just removed it. Okay, it was the only reason I would have used it. So, I'm gonna shut this page down altogether, like actually delete it. I'm just gonna get all the information off first. So, yeah. That's that. I'm going to give it a little bit of time before I get there. But, yeah, that's the plan there. So, shift the plans again. I don't think this is really going to, like I said, I don't think it's going to alter what I'm doing too dramatically. I think I might lose a day or two, but I think I should be able to get back to where I wanted to by the end of the week regardless. Hopefully. I have to do this. This isn't like... This is really obligatory. This is my comments on the music that I've been doing for the last 2 or 3 years. I can't lose this. I have to get it off. So, and I think it's clear that I shouldn't be putting it off anymore either. So, there's no shortcuts. There's no endpoints. There's no getting frustrated. I have to get this off and do it. So, yeah, time to do it. So what am I going to do then? Well, I want a blog. So I think that Blogspot's the best place to do it. Kind of using the same logic as previously. I may save the site in the end. But it'll end up being just the same as... yeah. Okay. I should do that. I should rip this down to just a CV and use Blogspot for blogging. Because you can actually access pages, right? Like, I don't understand how Facebook... Like, I don't understand what they're thinking. Like, this is just such a stupid bonehead move. Like what are you possibly going to gain from doing this besides pissing people off? You know, you bring a feature in and then you remove it, and then it's people get used to things, they plan things around it. It's just like if it's just about buying space in a feed. Okay, it's clear as day. It's a business model, and it's like get off. Everybody should just get off Facebook. Okay, it's shit, and it's basically useless for any purpose besides just selling ads. So it seems like the EAP has just declared the race for Clinton because she's got the required number of superdelegates. A little funny, huh? My guess is that NBC has decided that you'll stay home and watch Friends if you think the primary is already over. And now here come all of the Bernie is handing Trump the election articles, right? As though Clinton has nothing to do with it, right? But listen, I'm not walking on eggshells worried about what fucking Democrats think. I'm not going to, float around on pixie dust being concerned that I might offend a Democrat. You picked a shitty candidate. You'll have to deal with that. Next time, pick a less shitty candidate. Very simple, not complicated. You want some fucking 90s? Here's some fucking 90s for you. It's a song called Miss World by a band called Hole. You made your bed, now lie in it. As far as angry pop songs go from the 90s, that's one of the better ones, actually. I made my bed, I lie in it. If you want to put him in jail for 20 years, might I suggest contributing funds? Because I really don't want to pay to house, feed, and entertain this guy for the second third of his life, and then repeat for the last third because he can't find a job due to the fact that he's a convict. Listen, okay? I mean, who's being punished here? Right? Listen, nobody doubts that this is a problem, but vengeance is not an answer. It might make you feel good about yourself, but maybe you should seek help if vengeance makes you feel good about yourself. Deterrence doesn't work. It's just a waste of resources that could be better spent on things that actually work. Maybe you can have a bake sale to raise money to pay for food and shelter for rapists. Because, like I say, I don't want to pay for it. I'm really ultimately reacting to a different concept of freedom. You want to punish this guy? Don't put him in jail. Make him go to work. Okay, make him work at Walmart for 20 years. But you have to discard the concept of a free market first. You have to discard labor as freedom and understand it properly as slavery. Understand it property as slavery, yeah. It's subversive, okay? What's not subversive is, punishment, fire, brimstone. Leftists yell and scream that the Christian social order is a failure, and they're right. But they're not able to address the crux of the matter, okay? It's a tool rather than an end to itself. And so long as we accept these capitalist social norms, we're stuck in their self-perpetuation, okay? The system that puts this man, or this person in jail for 20 years is the system that created him in the first place. You're never going to see outside the cave. You're stuck. And you think this is a solution, but it's just the continuation of the problem. This might come off poorly to some people, but this guy doesn't need punishment. He doesn't need jail. He doesn't need lashes. He doesn't need to suffer. That's not going to help anybody. What he needs is to understand that what he did is wrong. And what society needs is for other people that are thinking about doing what he did to know that it's wrong. most people understand nowadays. Well, I say most. I think that that's maybe a little bit too generous, but I think that we like to think that most people understand nowadays that hitting your kids doesn't work. The reason that hitting your kids doesn't work is because it doesn't teach them anything. Or at least it doesn't teach them what you're trying to teach them. It teaches them something about violence. It teaches them something about hierarchy and control. But it doesn't teach them that they shouldn't have stolen the cookies out of the cookie jar, or they should have come home on time, or whatever is the thing that, you know. My father was very opposed to capital punishment. My mother was less so, but she couldn't. Every time my mom tried to hit me, she ended up crying. She wasn't opposed to it, but she just couldn't do it. The only time I ever got hit was by my stepfather. And I can only really remember once. And it was because I came home late. That's why that example came up. And all I remember thinking was the next time I come home late, or the next time I'm out late, I'll go to my dad's. Like, it didn't teach me anything other than ways to scheme out of the punishment. And this is an issue in our society that's a lot broader than this case. And it's a lot broader than rape. What is the problem that we have on Wall Street? Is that we have a culture where people are constantly trying to evade the law because they're not taught what's right. They're not taught what the right decisions are. To an extent, they don't even. To an extent, they're taught that there isn't anything that's right. And so the regulation scheme becomes around trying to find ways to catch them, rather than just teaching people what's right and wrong. And if we can't get out of this, then this will continue to happen, right? It may not satiate, your bloodlust, but like I say, that's a reflection of your own mental illness. We all live in this society. Okay? We're all damaged by it. Some of us more so than others, right? But rather than argue that you have some right to carry out your anger or to work through your vengeance, right? We need to collectively understand that your own vengeance, your own violence, is a function of the system itself, okay? And you need to work that out as much as he needs to work his issues out. Okay, we all have issues. And the solution here is that we all need to understand what's right and what's wrong. Now, in this circumstance, and I've made this argument myself, right? He really didn't understand what was right and wrong. Could you be that naive? Okay. But there's a difference between understanding what is right and wrong in a category, in a categoristic sense, okay, and understanding what is right and wrong in in an actual sense, right? Understanding that this is something that isn't to be done, right? And it's not deterrence, it's not violence that is going to come to a conclusion here. It's education. And like I say, I know it's offensive, you're triggered, but you're wrong. And I'm not gonna back off. I'm not gonna, going to bow down to some, rule of discourse. I'm going to argue with you. Your vengeance here is not acceptable. Your anger, your call for violence is not justified. Your emotions must be held in check. You need to look at it rationally, not in terms of anger and violence and retribution. This is the cave, right? That's all you've ever known. That's all you've ever seen. It's what the system pushes down on you. You are angry because of the Christian social order, not in spite of it. And transcending the order that you understand as the problem, okay, means transcending your emotions. Or, you could stay chained to the wall, and watch the shadows forever. I don't have a lot of faith in the idea that any of us are outside the cave, right? Or are going to get out of it anytime soon. I think that this cave has a long way to go before it gets smashed.